I've never had a worse experience ever. I really didn't see myself ever in my whole entire life trying drugs. I will never try drugs ever again. I just had the worst, what I would call a panic attack. Oh my gosh, I thought I had died. I thought that was what it was like to be dead. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Welcome to today's video, which is, I'm gonna say first of all and straight away, a big surprise. Did I ever think myself that I would be sitting here making a video about my experiences trying a drug? No, I didn't, and I don't think a lot of you guys expected it either. Now, this jumper might be on point. I was sent this whilst I was away. I look like I'm dressed for winter, I'm not gonna lie. I've never worn Juicy Couture in my life as well, but as part of the sustainability range, I was sent it, so thank you very much, Juicy Couture. I'm also drinking a hot drink and wearing a jumper in summer, but it's fine. It's kind of as well on theme, I was gonna say, you know, trying a green plant substance. But anyway, I am here ultimately to share my experiences with this drug and to talk about some of the biology behind weed. Holly, the biology geek, has entered the chat. We're in a jumper and it's summer and I do not care. But the main reason why I wanted to sit here and share this experience, you know, I haven't spoken about it at all online before. The reason why I'm doing so is because I wish I had known more about cannabis before I tried it. But, you know, even if something isn't harmful, it's harmless. If you misuse it, you know, it can be dangerous. I mean, it might not be the substance itself, it might be the environment that you're in. I'm also not sitting here telling you guys to do anything, try anything. That's not what I'm doing. I'm not promoting anything, even though I look like the drug itself. But I am here to share with you guys knowledge, and hopefully this is fun, interesting to watch. Definitely like this video if you do enjoy it. Subscribe if you are new and you're liking this content since I've been back home from traveling. Hit the bell so you know when I upload as well. And we'll dive straight into my first experience, which was last year. So my first ever time basically trying cannabis. So we're throwing it back to 2022. So this is last year because I'm posting this video in 2023. I did not plan that summer to try a drug for the first time in my whole entire life. I was supposed to be spending the whole duration of that summer traveling in Germany. I wasn't planning on going anywhere else, but if you followed that series, then you'll be very much aware that I didn't stay in Germany. I remember arriving in Amsterdam and like I was contemplating what Amsterdam and the Netherlands was known for, like bikes, tulips, Dutch pancakes have come to mind right now. But yeah, I do just remember entering the city, like coming out of the central train station, and you do start to smell what is cannabis is a drug. It is a psychoactive drug, which means it affects the mind, your mental state. Cannabis isn't legal in the UK, obviously, but it's legal in the Netherlands, obviously. I was not peer pressured at all. I need to emphasize that as well. I made the decision that I was going to try it because, I don't know, I was just like hungry that summer for trying new things. I wouldn't say it was like rebel behavior at all. I was just really curious. Cannabis contains these compounds that we call cannabinoids, and about 66 or over 60 of the 480 compounds in cannabis are cannabinoids. So they all share this similar chemical structure, and the most abundant of these, and the one that is responsible for like all of the psychoactive effects and the changes to your body, is THC, or specifically delta 9 THC, so tetrahydrocannabinol. Other cannabinoids are things like CBD. I'm not going to talk about CBD in this video, but it is another cannabinoid, so it shares that same chemical structure as THC, but it doesn't cause the psychoactive effects like delta 9 THC. And cannabis is ultimately derived from a plant. It's called cannabis sativa. So the preparation of cannabis varies. You can prepare it in different ways, take different parts of the plant. I'm not an expert on preparing cannabis, I've never done it, but you can smoke cannabis and you can take it in what we call edibles. But if you smoke cannabis, it's going to enter your bloodstream and therefore take effect on your brain and your body a lot faster than if you were to eat it or ingest it. It enters your bloodstream so quickly because it's absorbed via the pharynx, so your throat and your lungs. So it's gonna take effects in seconds, and peak effects are felt in minutes basically. And also a higher proportion of THC will enter your bloodstream this way, because if you ingest cannabis, it's going to be absorbed from the gut into your blood, but before it gets into like the general circulation in your body, it has to go through the liver, so it's going to start to be metabolized there, and it's going to take longer for those effects to be felt. So after several hours you're going to have peak effects. However, it's going to take an effect over a longer duration, because when you ingest cannabis as opposed to smoking it, you are going to be continuously absorbing it from your gut, so the effects are gonna last longer. I hadn't been on a run that morning. I'm saying this because it will kind of impact how I talk about my second experience. I'd had breakfast, I'd had lunch. I then set myself the mission to try and find a place that sold vegan edibles, and Happy Cow came to the rescue. They are quite expensive, I'm not gonna lie. They are €9, the most I've ever paid for a muffin, but I bought myself one, and obviously I was with others, as you guys know. Again, no peer pressure at all, like I really wanted to try this. And we took ourselves to this pub type thing, I think, and I basically ate the whole thing. It was just so good, I couldn't not. I basically set a timer on my phone because it said on this packet that it will start to take an effect after 60 to 90 minutes. I set a 60-minute timer, and in that 60 minutes, I didn't really feel anything. The only thing I started to feel was, I don't know, I started to go a bit quiet, but I would just like laugh at what people were saying. You know, the timer went off and I was like, it hasn't really hit me. So I set another half-an-hour timer. And let me say, by the time that timer went off, I had no idea it went off, because I had fallen asleep in that half an hour. This whole weed muffin had literally knocked me out. I wasn't unconscious, I had just fallen asleep. I had fallen into a very, very deep sleep. And bear in mind, this is in the middle of a public space, in a pub. You know, I was asleep. I think I was asleep, apparently, in that place for about 2 hours. This might be wrong, don't quote me on that, but I think an hour or so, maybe 2. Now, I feel bad for the 2 girls that I'd literally just met there and then, because, you know, their first impressions of me was me falling asleep. And then, because we were out in the town centre, or the city centre, sorry, we had to get back to the hostel where we were staying over the river. So Amsterdam Noord is the kind of island. It's not an island, but it's where Klinknoord is, the hostel. Let me just say, I was not very happy about being woken up because I was so tired. Now, it was during that time, the walk back to the boat, when I started to feel quite socially anxious. It was only like slight. Like, I remember thinking in my head, like, what am I doing here? Why am I here with these people? I'm not solo traveling anymore. Like, am I doing the right thing? A lot of these questions and thoughts started to cloud my mind. We got the boat over to the hostel, went back to the hostel. I fell asleep again in the communal area, and that was for another hour or so, 2 hours, maybe 3, I can't remember. And then I went back to my room. Someone took me back to my room. I was in a female dorm room, so I just literally did my teeth and I went to bed, and I slept for like 14 hours. I had the best night's sleep. Now, the whole thing kind of confuses me, as I will talk to you guys about when I share my second experience trying it. But I took the whole muffin, and bear in mind, it has in it 0.5 grams of weed in one whole muffin. That sent me to sleep the first time. Now, I probably did overdose. That was probably too much. That's why it completely wiped me out. But the second time I tried it, I think I also overdosed, as I'm going to share with you guys, but it had a completely different effect on my brain and my body. And this second time was so scary. Let me tell you that. It was the scariest thing I've probably ever done in my life, besides maybe bungee jumping, but I feel like this is even scarier than my bungee jumping experience. I'm actually boiling in this jumper. I don't know why I decided to wear it, but it's actually so nice. So my second experience trying cannabis was this year, earlier in the year, when I went to Amsterdam for the second time. And again, no peer pressure was involved. I decided to try cannabis for the second time. I mean, I had such a great first experience, you know, so I just really wanted to try it again. I had been on like a 15k run that morning with Angelo around Blondel Park, and then we'd come back, had breakfast. Now, my stomach obviously wasn't empty, but I probably was that morning in a calorie deficit. You know, you can consume weed, take weed on an empty stomach, but the effects are just going to be different. Like, if you have an empty stomach, for example, like the effects are going to be faster, and they're going to hit sooner in comparison to, you know, you having a full stomach, because it takes longer to absorb it, basically. You know, I ate a quarter first of all. I was going to limit myself this time. I should have stopped there, but no, they're so innocent looking, and you forget that it has 0.5 grams of weed in it. I was looking at this muffin, it was staring me in the eyes, and I ate another quarter. So I ate half of this muffin. That was still probably an overdose, as I said. I should have just had a quarter. Oops. Angelo also took half. But bear in mind, you know, we're different people, we're different sizes. He didn't really feel anything. He maybe felt slightly more calm and relaxed. But I had clearly overdosed again. Now this time, I didn't get sent to sleep straight away. I had this whole crazy experience before I eventually fell asleep. So I want to talk about cannabis high because it's a very complex experience and it depends on quite a few different factors. If you've read anything about drug use, you may have come across the theory of drug set and setting. So it was proposed by this professor at Harvard called, his name has poofed out of my mind, so I'm going to put it on the screen. But he proposed that the effect of a drug depends not only on the drug dose, obviously, but the set and the setting. Now the set refers to the mindset of the user, and then the setting refers to your environment. And those three factors collectively, they determine the outcome of the drug. But with a cannabis high, there can be so many different things that you feel. A lot of them are positive, don't get me wrong. You can feel very calm, relaxed, you know, it induces stress relief. Some people feel more creative. You can have like enhanced perception, so like colors can seem like really vivid. Like my jumper right now might be bright blue instead of bright blue. You can start to hallucinate, for example. You enter like a dream-like transient state. You might have enhanced sociability. Cannabis can also like increase your appetite, we know that, and it can also lead to drowsiness. But there are negative effects seen during a cannabis high as well. You can have time distortion, you can feel really paranoid, anxious. It can also impair like memory, for example. And these negative effects, they usually happen in like people who haven't taken drugs before. So naive users, i.e. myself, and those who are already like vulnerable psychologically. So if you're feeling really anxious that day or already really sad and depressed, like you're probably not going to have a good high experience using cannabis. The first thing that started to happen was I like started to bob continuously. It was like an unconscious bobbing. I was just like, you know, vibing. The next thing that we notice is my eyes and my pupils start to dilate. They start to look a bit bloodshot. And that's when things started to get like quite concerning for me and Angelo. I noticed that my heartbeat was racing. It was so deep and so fast. I was literally like, what is going on? I started to panic at this point, okay? I was so worried about these physical effects. I was starting to struggle to like actually form sentences, it looked like. At the time I didn't really realize that, but that is what was happening. And then I started to feel really drowsy again. So I was like, you know, bobbing, but I was like starting to feel really sleepy. So I start to like almost doze off. And then I do eventually just like doze off and I fall onto Angelo's shoulder. He then put me to the side on this really comfy seat and he was panicked himself. He was so good like the whole time. I need to just say that he was like the best, because had I been on my own or in a different situation, like I just think things would have been so much worse. But like he went to one of the people working in the shop and he kind of asked them like, do you know what we should do? And their advice was to take me outside to get some fresh air. I did not realize it could affect all other parts of my body as well as my brain, and that's what really scared me. So it can cause tachycardia, which is an increased heart rate, and this is honestly crazy because you can see your heart rate double, you know. Some people's can go up to like 160 beats per minute, and that's like me running at a moderate intensity. It can also like change your blood pressure. It can decrease your blood pressure. It can also increase your blood pressure. It can cause dilation of the blood vessels in your eye, so they appear really bloodshot. Again, that's what happened to me. It can make you feel like tingly, very lightheaded. I was then starting to panic not only about what was happening to my body, but I was like, oh my gosh, my phone, is it gonna be okay? My camera's in my bag, like please make sure no one takes it. Me panicking in every single way possible basically. But we sat on this seat outside. It was starting to rain. The owners were so nice and they gave us an umbrella. And one of the coffee shop workers as well, they gave me a like sugar tablet thing. But yeah, I believe what happened is my heart rate was pounding and beating so fast because my blood pressure had dropped. So to compensate for that, my heart was beating faster. So the coffee shop worker, one of the guys, was like, okay, eat this sugar thing. He ended up giving me 2 of them. I don't know if that helped at all, but what it did do is it made like my paranoia, we're gonna say, even worse, because I was chewing this sugar thing and I had convinced myself that a granule of sugar was stuck in my throat and I was going to choke and die. Now, all of my extreme thoughts that I'm going to share with you guys, I started to have really extreme thoughts. They all centered basically around death. I thought I had died. You guys, I'm not even joking. I was like, I shouldn't have done this. I started to regret everything. I was like, I want this to stop right now. I shouldn't have had the muffin again. I was so worried that I would like have to be rushed to hospital, something really bad would happen to me, and then my family and everyone would blame Angelo when it was not his fault at all. To top it all off, my heart rate was still racing. I still felt kind of faint and dizzy. I didn't feel myself at all. So eventually Angelo was like, okay, I think we need to get back to the hostel. We were again staying in the same hostel, so across the river, Klinknord. And oh my gosh, I think the boat was one of the worst things for me. We stepped onto this boat. It was so busy. I just had the worst, what I would call a panic attack. I've never had a panic attack, and I don't want to, you know, throw these things around. I don't know if it was a proper panic attack, but I felt like it was a panic attack. I felt like I was screaming internally. I felt very dizzy, lightheaded. I thought I was going to faint. The noise of the boat was like amplified in my head, and as I said, I was screaming internally. As soon as the boat door closed and I heard that bang, I thought I was trapped. I felt very claustrophobic. Oh my gosh, at one point I literally thought I was just gonna collapse on the floor because it was so bad. I was on like the verge of tears, and I was also like shaking by this point. The journey across the river is literally like no more than a few minutes, but it felt like a lifetime. But we went back to Klinknord. We just had to walk a short way, and then we went back to our dorm room. I was worried about like my phone. I was like, Angelo, where's my camera? Like, I was asking him so many times because I was just paranoid about everything. But we lay down anyway. I lay next to Angelo. The first thing that hit my mind was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna lie on my back and I'm gonna choke on this piece of sugar that I thought was in my throat. I think it was all psychological, but I had convinced myself that I was choking, or I was going to choke on this bit of sugar. So I didn't want to lie on my back. I was worried about that. So my head kind of hit the pillow. I didn't fall asleep straight away, but oh my gosh, I went on some of the worst trips of my life. So when you're like high or you're acutely intoxicated with a drug, basically you kind of like trip out. They say you're tripping out, you go on these trips. You cannot imagine what it feels like. We don't really still know that much about a cannabis high. We do know that it's due to the cannabinoids in cannabis, specifically delta-9 THC, and the effects through it binding to cannabinoid receptors. So in our body we have two cannabinoid receptors. We have CB1 and we have CB2. Now most of the psychoactive effects and the physical effects on your body, they are due to delta-9 THC binding to CB1, because CB1 is found in the brain, the spinal cord, your nervous system basically, and in peripheral tissues, whereas the CB2 receptors, they're mostly found in the immune system, and so they're not responsible for the cannabis high and the effects of the drug on your brain and your body. So to understand like THC and how it affects the brain and the body through binding to CB1, I need to talk about the endocannabinoid system. So we have cannabinoids in our bodies, and they are called endocannabinoids. So endo meaning within, whereas THC, delta-9 THC, and CBD, they are like exocannabinoids. They are taken in externally, and this system affects like every single bodily function, like essential bodily functions like sleep, pain, appetite, temperature control. All of these things are influenced by the endocannabinoid system, which is really cool, but their effects are, you know, physiological, and they are very tightly regulated inside our bodies to keep everything in check. And that's because they're made on demand, they're made in small amounts to have transient effects, and they're inactivated when we don't need them anymore. So if we take delta-9 THC and we take the CB1 receptor, like the endocannabinoid system, you know, delta-9 THC binds to the CB1 receptors and it affects neurotransmission. It affects the release of neurotransmitters at synapses. But unlike the endocannabinoids, as I said, their effects are not physiological, they're not normal anymore. And so we don't have these small and transient changes. And we believe that through acting on different parts of the brain and also in your body, it has the different effects. So for example, like we know delta-9 THC can interfere with memory, in particular short-term memory, and we know that in the brain the hippocampus is really important for memory, and so THC binding to CB1 receptors in the hippocampus is most likely to be responsible for changes in memory. And we could go on and talk about the different effects in different parts of your brain, but that's ultimately what we think is going on. It's gonna be really hard to describe, but the first thing that I experienced was like time distortion, or like the same scene was being played on repeat in my head. I was tripping out and then I was coming back to consciousness, and when I was tripping out, I thought I had died. I thought that was what it was like to be dead. But during these trips, as I said, this scene was being played on repeat, and the scene that I was playing on repeat was Angelo basically being like, it's okay, Holly, it's gonna be okay, everything's all right. But the way I saw it in my mind on these trips, I also had other ones, but I can't remember them. But one of them that really has stayed in my mind is like, my vision, or what I was seeing, was this geometric pattern. It was like a glass had been shattered, and in every shattered piece of glass, that scene was being replayed. And on top of that, the shattered pieces of glass were a mix of like red and grey, kind of like translucent. That was like one of my trips. And then I would like come back into consciousness. As I said, I'd like kind of like startle myself a bit. I was still shaking, I was still like almost crying with Angelo, and I just wanted it to stop. Eventually I stopped tripping out and I fell asleep, and that was like the end of it. And oh my gosh, was I so glad it was over. I think for me personally, the reason why I had such a different experience was maybe because the first time I, you know, clearly overdosed, and I went past that point of experiencing a high and tripping out that I just fell asleep straight away. Whereas the second time I still overdosed, but I hadn't had like the whole thing, so I didn't go to sleep straight away, but I still had too much, so I experienced quite a bad high, and then I eventually went to sleep. The final thing I just wanted to talk about from a biological perspective was like, does cannabis cause any long-term changes to your brain? Now the research in this area is very like wishy-washy. Some studies showed that it can, you know, cause small but statistically significant effects on your cognition and your brain health even after you've stopped using the drug. But as I said, that's still an open-ended question because the studies are very poorly designed. There aren't many of them, but we do know that cannabis does 9 THC. It's not neurotoxic, so it doesn't like physically damage your nerve cells. And in terms of like general health risks, if you do smoke cannabis, it can result in, you know, respiratory conditions, and it might alter your risk of certain types of cancer because smoking cannabis, when you smoke cannabis, often it's mixed with tobacco. Another question that's kind of also open-ended at the moment is, does cannabis alter your risk of, you know, stroke, heart attacks, because it causes changes to your heart rate and your blood pressure and stuff? But on the flip side, we do have research being done that looks into the use of cannabis in medicine and like for a beneficial purpose. I'm gonna leave it there. If you do have any questions, definitely comment down below. Like this video if you did enjoy it, and subscribe, as I said at the start, if you are new. Let me know if you want to hear about anything in particular. As always, I will leave you with the bloopers at the end, and I will speak to you as always very soon in another video. Bye! There's an aeroplane, so I do apologize. We just have to wait. They might be going to Amsterdam, you never know. Ladies, you have to calm down because I'm filming. Good girl. Jump off, lie down. Okay, this was a bad idea bringing them in here. Shh, ladies.